So Shafir will be making a presentation today based on the music and feminist revolution among Kurdish women and in Iran. And now he will begin his presentation.
Thank you very much, Frida. I appreciate your contribution to this talk. I also appreciate my students who are present in the room and students who are basically observing remotely, family members, friends, everyone basically that I know intimately. Apparently, you are here. And I'm delighted to basically be talking about a very important issue, which is not just an issue related to women in Iran. It is not just related to Kurdish women. It is related to all women. It is related to all human beings, as a matter of fact. Definitely, Afshin Matin was a professor of history. I'm a professor of linguistics, English and ESL, would be more qualified to answer any questions related to the history of the movement and the momentum that it has taken on. So please feel free to ask historical questions. I'm not going to go into the details, nor do I find myself qualified to do so. So I have prepared a presentation that I would like to begin with. Let me share my screen with you. So it is the songs of feminism protests in Iran. It is actually impossible to condense nightmares that the Islamic Republic has imposed on the Iranian people, the Kurds among them. The Islamic Republic is a legacy of repression. It is impossible in one slide really to say what they have done. 4 decades of oppression, repression, censorship, imprisonment, execution, discrimination, gender apartheid, economic crisis, environmental destruction, massacre of young children, surveillance, terrorism, poisoning, flogging, blinding, amputations, prison, massacre, death penalty. And from the first execution that they did in my hometown, in which basically 2 sons of one of my relatives who died in exile, Miss Nahid, 2 of her sons were executed here. She was forced into exile. I have been in exile actually for more than around 40 years. So this is the legacy of not only the nightmare of the Islamic Republic, but it is also the story of the heroism, the story of the resistance, the story of the dreams that the people basically have put up against the Islamic Republic. The world really had not come to see the scope and the depth of the repression until a feminist uprising began, when Jina Amini, this young woman, a 23-year-old Kurdish woman, an aspiring student like you, was brutally killed in custody of the so-called morality police in September 2022. And her crime was probably walking the street for improper hijab. Her death, Jina Amini's death, sparked a feminist revolution in her hometown, Saqqez, where Kurdish women and girls removed and burned their imposed scarves. So this slogan, the Kurdish slogan, Jina Zadeh, I just said that in Kurdish, women, life, freedom, spread like wildfire. Now this slogan, how it became popularized, how it became universalized. The Iranian basically diaspora, including the Kurds, rose. Social media became the context for relaying the news of the social protest that has lasted more than now 88 months. The feminist discourse became the new manifesto. It challenged basically the mandatory hijab and marginalization and discrimination. It is important to keep in mind that not only basically women who oppose hijab, but also women who wear the hijab rose up against the Islamic Republic. So protests in the aesthetic forms of photographs, drawings, paintings, poems, rich in text and imagery and songs abounded and reached the world through social media. So social media played a very significant role. In essence, this song really brought to the world I have to sign up, so I'd rather show this later on if we have time. This was a song based on the fragments of wishes and desires and dreams, aspirations of people. And it ranged from environmental preservation to dreams that the people as a whole had, to a prosperous economy, to happiness on the face of an Afghani child. So it was really fragments of tweets that became really a universal song that was recognized, actually was recognized internationally by artists, by international celebrities, and it was Jina who recognized and offered the award, the Amy Award to the songwriter, in this case, Hajipur. So what I want to stress is social media played a very significant role in this, and social media was significantly changed by this movement itself. Social media had been used previously in previous movements, ranging from, for instance, Egypt to Tunisia to Yemen, but it was never so powerfully and pervasively used. And part of that, it was because of the anger really spread like wildfire. It occupied all forms of expression on the social media, and women under the Islamic Republic had faced segregation, gender apartheid, inequality in sports events, marriage, professional injustice, pay, judicial courts, economic inequality, even singing. In the Islamic Republic, women could not sing. And I should say that Kurds have the honor, and because Kurdish music really plays a very significant role in the identity of Kurds, they were the first one who sang in protest against the Islamic Republic. Suppression machinery has now gone basically to work. Hundreds and then thousands who have been arrested, kidnapped, imprisoned, tortured, mostly high school and university students, journalists, actors, artists, you just name it. Prisons are full, and so many people have been killed and wounded by the Islamic Republic. This slogan, which is now in Arabic here, you see, and in Persian, has been translated in so many different languages. Probably this is a slogan that has been translated in more languages in the history of humanity than any other slogan. And again, I should say this is a Kurdish slogan, but it is no longer a Kurdish slogan. It is a slogan that belongs to the entire humanity. So diaspora, and I consider myself diasporic, a diasporic Kurd, because I was really forced into exile, has replicated and reinforced the message of protest and unprecedented solidarity. Europe, North America, Asia, through feminist solidarity campaigns. They have ranged from the Middle East to China, to Japan, to India, to Afghanistan, to Kurdish women in Turkey, Iraq, and Syria, everywhere. Women basically and men have risen in solidarity. So the slogan of Women Like Freedom captured really the high offices and celebrities. And why? Because it is very simple, it is true, it is profound, it is rhythmic.
Amir Sharifi داره یه لکچر میده برای Women Life Freedom protest songs. Feminist protests. History of feminist.
So
Zoom.
activism going into it, it has a long history in Iran, but just briefly, it is rooted in 1905, a constitutional revolution. In 1953, CIA actually led a coup against the democratic nationalist government and restored basically monarchy. In 1979, a revolution for change toppled the Shah's regime, which was put into place by the CIA. The Iranian women's protest to the imposition of the Islamic veil after 1979 revolution subjected them to Sharia law, and Kurdish people who had aspirations for cultural, social, and linguistic rights said no to the Islamic Republic. Again, I would say that Kurds had the honor basically to be the first ones to say no to the Islamic Republic, where, you know, there were intellectuals and so-called leftists who basically were betrayed by the so-called anti-imperialism of the Islamic Republic. 2017 to 2021, protests against mostly economic woes took place. The slogan, "Women, Life, Freedom," was rooted in Kurdish grassroots activism against persecutions in Iran, Iraq, Turkey, and Syria. The slogan was popularized further by Kurdish women in Turkey. And then in Syria, when women basically rose against the reign of the terror of the Islamic state of Syria and Iraq. The tragic death of this young girl, a Kurdish woman, primarily triggered a popular protest against the Islamic Republic. You could see the slogan here. You could see women fighting in Syria. You could see basically how hundreds of thousands of people went to the funeral of this young woman who was brutally killed when she was in the custody of the morality police. She was hit so severely on the head that she fell into a coma from which she never woke up. So the heart of the movement is really this slogan. It built and transmitted a new discourse of radical transformation. Electronic recordings of artwork spread throughout the social media as defiance became more creative, aesthetically speaking. Accessibility created immediate rebounding of aesthetics and political outcries mediated by social media. The truth about theocracy came to be known, and many young women and men were killed and thousands were imprisoned and tortured. So I have talked about basically the nightmares of the Islamic Republic. The nightmare is still going on. Let me just talk about basically how the shift towards basically dreams, aspirations, and transformation basically happened in the world of music. I'm not going to go into the methods. The slogan of Women, Life, Freedom spread in different languages, locally and internationally. You might have seen it. But what is significant about this movement is the feminist discourse rejected monoglossia of Persian and binary gender roles and identities associated with the structure of patriarchy. It opened up a new discourse, and this is really something new in Iran. Marginalized nationalities such as the Kurds, Baluchis, you know, all these people asserted their autonomy and self-expression in and through language and heroic actions. So what I want to really stress would be this dimension, interglossia, where you have basically intertextuality, where you have, according to, if I want to use not just simply heterotextuality or hybridity of text, but to use Vlashinov's notion of multi-accentuality. You have a blending of languages and dialects for the first time in the history of the country. in political basically messages and in aspirations for change. So let me just show you, hopefully these would show, a few songs. The first one is Rising. A woman throws away her scarf amid jubilation. This is a woman in Rojava or western part of Syria, which is called Rojava. So let's go to this one. Okay, here's another one. So this is the musician. He composed the piece. There's a Kurdish musician in Sweden. These are images of the protests in different parts of Iraq. This is the Baluchi man who was killed.
شوقاریان سور کرد بخوین لاوەکان مزگێنی ڕۆژی ئازادیم پێیە ببورن ئەگەر نەختێک دواکەوتن من بەربەیانی شادی یەبینم مەرگی زاڵم و بێدادی یەبینم بەرهەمی دروشمی پیرۆزی کوردان واتە ژن ژیان ئازادی یەبینم سفر همتی کن پشت در جانمونی با کاروان روان شو تنها در نمونی امور لسر شقم و شقم سنگره پیکا و بو پیشوه سنگو کل مسوغره یا هم سفر هترکن پشت و تام ممانی گم کاروان نگونگم دورا
our instruments that are used also are very violin, guitar.
زيرين لسر چکی جنگاوران لسر تاج و تختی زيرين لجنگل و دول و بیابان لسر پینه برگی خاکیم لسر شتاوی مانگشو لسر چکی من دویم ناوت انوسم سربستی ناوت انوسم سربستی لسر کلگو لسر اسو لسر پرو بالی ملان لرنگو بونی کازی والا عارقی خستی زریان لدیوارو تختی درگم لهر شتی بنر خلام لشپولی گری پیروز ناوت انوسم سربستی جن جیان آزادی زن زندگی آزادی جن جیان آزادی زن زندگی آزادی.
This one, Come to the Battlefield. It's a duet, Persian and Kurdish.
لقيتو ما يخشي بميرم برا ميدان براي دليلم لقيتو ما يخشي بميرم برا ميدان براي دليلم بتيكو شانو خبات وانا نسقر كين ولاد قد قابا آواتي جن جيان آزادي لقيتو ما يخشي بميرم برا ميدان براي دليلم لقيتو ما يخشي بميرم برا ميدان براي دليلم جن آزادی بتیکو شانو خبات وانا نسقر كين ولاد قد قابا آواتي جن جيان آزادي لقيتو ما يخشي بميرم برا ميدان براي دليلم لقيتو ما يخشي بميرم برا ميدان براي دليلم
دیسان دژمنی خوێن ڕێژی غەدار کەوتە نێو لاوان هەروەک گورگی هار درەندەی بەدخوو جەلادی سەرشێت بۆ خوێن ڕشتنی ملەت کەوتە کار دیسان ڕەنگین بوو چنگی گڵاوی بە خوێنی پاکی خەڵکی لادێ و شار دوژمن بزانە تۆڵەی هاوڕێیان ئەستێنمەوە من یەک بە هەزار گەرچی ڕەشپۆشم بۆ هاوڕێکانم ورم بەرزترە بۆ تۆی ستەمکار بژی ئازادی بژی یەکگرتوویمان بە کوێری چاوی دوژمن هەزار جار
لەگە تۆ مای خوشکی بمێرم وەرە مەیدان بەرای دەلێرم لەگە تۆ مای خوشکی بمێرم وەرە مەیدان بەرای دەلێرم بە تێکۆشان و خەبات وەرە دەستگارکەین وڵات گەردەگا بە ئاواتی ژن ژیان ئازادی لەگە تۆ مای خوشکی بمێرم وەرە مەیدان بەرای دەلێرم لەگە تۆ مای خوشکی بمێرم وەرە مەیدان بەرای دەلێرم
ای دشمن خونریز ظالم
درنده بدخواه غاصب دیوانه بدان که انتقام فرزندانمان را خواهیم گرفت.
باران آزادیت باره که زیاده از مانکشین و روشن رون هیلی بری بیاده خیلاتا بدان کر باقی بر خدا نامه حبسامه چند تاری بگشت بکنیده تبلند کر بانگاشن جنجیان و آزادی ناوی ترم زامه جینا جان دایلاتی دنگ شهید بوناته گل و حوز شیار کرن زمان جنم بندست هارت رزگار کرن داویدی بیک چاری دستانا کف نشوبی بچار دور جهانی ناویده هار کرن جنجیان آزادی 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 توی هزو خوردی یا برو باز کن که بکن هبی و امیدامش آنازی یا بکن نوی تمایش مره بوجیانی او بسه ایدی کس نبیشه مجینا تنو بکسه تبلند کر بانگاجن جنجیان و آزادی نوی ترم زامه جینا جان دولاتی تبلند کر بانگاجن جنجیان و آزادی نوی ترم زامه جینا جان دولاتی
song. As you could see, these songs primarily show the intermingling of dialects and languages, Sorani, Kermanji, Persian, Baluchi, mostly Iranian, basically, languages. And there are actually 70 languages spoken in country. So what I wanted to do methodologically was to look at basically the metaphors. I do have, actually, I'm re-echoing co-presenter who was not here, Ashouri. Metaphors that are used: rain, blue sky, bright, smile, blood, dark, sadness, wings of dove, inherit life and youth. So, poetry and songs are filled with metaphors. Caravan, traveler, trenches, pace of time, left behind, unbending, brave, dawn, sun, images and golden imprints, weapons of warriors, golden crown and throne, patches of tattered garment, brightness of the moonlight, fields, horizon, wings, and feathers of birds, color and fragrance of dawn. So it's all about dreams and momentum that really goes into toppling the Islamic Republic. The music itself, the sound patterns, the synthesis of traditional and Western instruments expand the repertoire and universal appeal and aesthetics. And what is significant about this is the polyphony, multiple voices and harmony across different languages, different basically singers, alliterations, assonance, repetition, individual poetic pieces. All these really mark these songs. What I really want to do, not to go into the details of the kind of speech acts that are used in these songs, that is the topic for a paper in itself, but directives, for instance, such as follow traveler, let's set out, come along with the caravan, come to the streets are today, trenches, live for liberty. These are all directives. Declarative in alleys, towns, and villages, it is a wedding and dancing time. The reign of freedom is falling upon us. You raise the call of women. These are all declaratives. Expressives, women, life, freedom, the slogan itself, death to the dictator. You, the unbending brave one. Woman, life is for all people. For women, life, freedom. And commissives such as the sun gave me hope. The time of triumph is near. So as I was saying, I talked about not only metaphors that are used quite effectively in these songs, but also the intermingling of languages. Those of you who speak Iranian languages, obviously you could tell how each language was used or were. So this explanation was only for those who do not speak those languages. The speech acts is really an interesting arena to study. For instance, the ways in which they use directives. Fellow travel, let's set out, come along with the caravan, come to the streets. The streets are today trenches, live for liberty, so on and so forth. There were declarative sentences, such as in alleys, towns, and villages, it is wedding and dance time. The reign of freedom is falling upon us. You raise the call of women. Or expressive. Expressive speech acts are those acts that we do things. Now, you are studying basically English, for instance. Expressive, anything that expresses feelings and emotions would be called expressive. So women, life is for all people, for women, life and freedom. Or commissive acts, things that we commit ourselves towards doing in the future, such as the sun gave me hope, the time of triumph is near. So these are all different kinds of speech acts. Speech acts are very significant in revolutionary songs and uprising. You know why? Because language is not an abstraction. Language is something that we do things with. And that is why these are important. Only some of them have been identified. So speech acts really create those communicative zones, communicative acts used in the songs. And these communicative acts basically have functions. The function is to trigger, to instigate, to provoke, to help people basically rise. They have implications. What are the implications of these basically songs? Recurrent themes in the architecture of the slogan, woman, life, freedom, against theocracy and its rhythm of joy, rapid pace, and tempo. You could see how the music was really rapid and it really provokes to action. Rhetorically, musically, and linguistically, the political songs have been built to transmit the emerging discourse and creative movement of form through art and social media. The songs holistically are public outcry and demand for change, for freedom from the shackles of oppression and patriarchy of the Islamic Republic. So the diverse discourses used in the songs embody and enact their multi-vocality and polyphony. So the songs really challenge the status quo, the Islamic Republic. There is an emotional power of form in them. There is the capacity to surprise and shock. There is a singular perception of coherence, rhythm, and novelty, which give these songs, especially, for instance, the ones that are polyphonic, a force of communication that makes it a counter-discourse, an effective rival of religion, which only knows one, basically, language. And that is the language of force, not the power of language, but the language of power. When we contemplate the meaning of the songs, for example, it may be supposed, hypothetically speaking, appropriate for the moment. Nonetheless, plausibly, they encode the cerebral architecture of emancipation. These are the songs of freedom. These are the songs of emancipation. These songs engage initially visual areas of the mind and analyze form, color, distribution in space, and possibly the simulation of the movement. The harmony of forms and colors selectively activate the memories that are stored in our minds. So it is music that creates harmony between sensuality and reason without having to resort to explicit reasoning, free joy without deliberate expression. But music possesses additional dimension, the faculty of stimulating the mind, the evocative power that makes images, memory, recollections, and gestures suddenly appear in the mind of the viewer or listener, and in doing so provides food for the thought and gives rise to dreams to be shared dreams or authentically good life with the freedom of speech and understanding of which only music and poetry are capable here without or with recourse to language. So it is neither basically the law nor morality in their normative forms, nor science with language of rigorous objectivity. None of these can to develop the imagination to inspire new plans for a shared and harmonious future. The songs and images, by their evocative power, call for the responsibility of others. So Gramsci has an important saying. My purpose was really to show the connection between the feminist uprising in Iran and the role that social media has played in the absence of any sort of democracy in the country. And this is what Gramsci says quite aptly. Social protests and social devices, media have a dialectical relation which makes freedom possible. It is a means of basically struggle. So Jina Amini's Mahasa Amini's feminist movement is the first global women's movement and perhaps the manifestation of dialectical social protest and social media. That is how this movement can create a new perspective and a new definition for democracy, not only in Iran, but throughout the world. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Sharifi, for that amazing presentation. Now we'll be moving along to the questions you guys have for him. Move on to the chat box. So the first question reads, does the Islamic government block the pages of activists where the slogan of freedom is promoted, or is it in a low profile to prevent them from locating? This question is from Ross, I think it says Rosibi Barrera.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, that is the first question for you today.
It's a very complex, basically, question. The way I basically comprehend it is that the Islamic Republic primarily did both. Right now, they are basically trying to bring women into a low profile to the extent of subjecting them to surveillance. And as a matter of fact, they are using social media. Social media is a double-edged sword to control or to identify women who don't wear hijab, or they don't wear hijab properly. So therefore, you know, the cry of women for freedom was far more. It transcends really hijab, so to speak, but it found its manifestation, its voice, the multiplicity of voices in opposing the Islamic Republic. The Islamic Republic had been opposed before, as I said, but definitely I would say it is really both. The Islamic Republic now is desperately trying, I would say, to primarily, not that it is less coercive, but to use the discourse of so-called logic, which is another form of fallacy, to bring basically, or to bring attention to the world that women in Iran are free, that women have gained momentous rights. And I would say, yes, that is true. Women have gained momentous rights throughout the country, but that has a reverse relationship with the rights that they don't have, for instance. But we have a highly educated population of women, and that's why young high school girls are the immediate target. Hundreds and hundreds of them, thousands of high schools have been poisoned and continue to be poisoned. So going back to the question itself, it is trying everything to block the pages. This is democracy. Democracy is a contestation. It is the site of basically conflicts and compromises. And the Islamic Republic obviously came to realize how activists were using, the young generation, as a matter of fact, were using social media so productively, so competently, so it came to control them, and as a matter of fact, trying to suppress any spread or dissemination of news about Iran from leaving the country or from within, outside the country, from the Iranian diaspora to the inside. So it does both, but I think social media still is a democratic force. And as I said, there is a dialectical relationship. We make social media in the same way that social media basically would make us. And the Islamic Republic only knows one thing, how to use it as a force of repression.
Yes. Thank you, Roseby, for that question. Now we'll be moving on to Mirmaz Hidari's questions. What role can individuals and organizations play in supporting the women's life freedom movement and advancing its goals?
I think, any step anywhere by anyone, by an individual or organization would be significant. What is significant is not really the step, we take one step today and basically two steps backward. It is a permanent revolution. And definitely women in the world have to be set free. They set themselves free from the shackles of patriarchy, but this requires a permanent revolution. And I think that's what it takes. So individuals and political organizations should really expand, deepen the underlying message of this revolution and make it a permanent feature. It's not just within Iran. It is not a local, it is a national, it is an international movement.
Yes, most definitely. Thank you, Mirmaz, for that question. Moving on to Alfredo Lopez's question. It seems that many songs, poems are direct and explicit regarding their political stances. Do you believe more subtle musical approaches would have the same effect?
Subtle music definitely has its own message, but this feminist revolution, social revolution, required basically openness. The Iranian culture is really noted for, if not notorious, for subtlety. So in essence, subtlety is used when there is basically a breeze or there is very little room for self-expression, or when one wants to express his musical or her creative, aesthetic basically sense. I would say during this time, we have all kinds. For instance, the metaphors really have subtle meanings, but in the context of the movement itself, these metaphors, for instance, have a specific meaning. The speech acts, for instance, that are used, such as directives, all of a sudden find immediate, accessible meaning. So I think it really changes with time, and it also changes with the perception that we have. And those perceptions are shaped by social movement in this particular case.
Yes. Okay, thank you, Alfredo, for that question. Now we're moving on to Mirmaz's second question. How have activists worked to overcome this problem?
They have done everything. The problem is surmountable. The problem is a nightmare. And they have been in power for a long, long time. So it takes basically patience, prudence, and knowledge, and it requires mobilization. It requires the interconnection among networks within the Iranian society, among nationalities. It requires basically coherence within diaspora and Iran as a whole. So it really requires a permanent, I would say, a revolution of some sort. So activists should become involved indefatigably in this struggle. And the moment we give up, and that is what the Islamic Republic wants, we would be definitely lost. Activists should not give up. We cannot give in. We cannot give up.
Thank you once again for that question. It looks that is all the questions for today. If anyone has to wish to ask another question now from the class, if they would like to ask Professor a question now, any students?
Yeah, I guess you would be heard because we do have a smart classroom, really smart.
Yes.
But it's not as smart as you are.
I have a question.
Yes.
On some of the songs, you noted that it was Persian and Kurdish, so both languages were in the song.
Yes.
Oh, so are they like closely related or like?
Kurdish and Persian are linguistically related in the same way, for instance, Spanish and French or Italian basically are related, even I would say even closer linguistically speaking, but they are distinct languages. The only difference is Persian has dominated really all other languages, including Kurdish in Iran. So this feminist basically revolution is changing that.
Were there any victories gained during and after the movement?
No, that's a very good question. It depends how you really measure victory. I think the most important victory is the very foundation of the Islamic Republic was shaken. It's still there, but it is dead. Even those who were basically reformists and believed that religious basically reformism would work, these people came to the realization that there is no hope in the Islamic Republic. So the Islamic Republic is dead. It's a corpse. What has kept it is really a brutal, repressive force of an army called Sepah Pasdaran, the Islamic really guards. They are the ones who have maintained it. It has even lost its ideological really following, so to speak. It cannot even mobilize enough people to go to its events of support. So the greatest achievement is women have really freed themselves and freed the Iranian men to a great extent. And the Islamic basically Republic has been really trembling. It continues to be trembling nationally and internally. So the greatest victory is perhaps the Islamic Republic is still in power, but women can walk about basically freely and they don't really give a damn to the Islamic Republic and what it is going to do. So the acts of defiance, I think, would be the greatest victory. Whether the Islamic Republic is in power or not, now is not really the issue because the Islamic Republic is dead. Long live women, life, and freedom. And what, achievement can we have? Obviously, we want to have the regime go. And that is not an easy task. Would it go today, tomorrow, and 5 years? I don't really know. I don't have a crystal ball. But I think for me, at least, as a pro-feminist man, I think that is the greatest achievement.
I think so.
Yes.
What has the United States done? Have they done anything to support this movement, or have they really done anything at all?
That's a very good question. Actually, Iranian community, diaspora, including the Kurds, is quite heterogeneous, and their expectations from foreign states would also be quite different. So what we really want the United States to do is to remain faithful to human rights. But human rights basically and US interests have not converged. And the US government, despite its rhetoric, is still willing, or perhaps now it cannot, primarily because of the outcries of this diasporic community to go back to negotiations when it comes to the nuclear threat that Iran has imposed, has posed to the world. So the expectations vary, but I would say a discourse that this movement has created is that foreign governments should not interfere in our affairs. We have peaceful coexistence with everyone, but we do not want anyone to interfere in the affairs of our country. The US government has a very dark history in Iran. I mean, they brought the Khomeini, to power. They brought the basically Shah, the monarchical system, to power. So I think probably most people agree that it should stay out of.
Didn't they also bring in like the Ayatollah Amini?
Ayatollah Khomeini, yeah. So anyway, that's why this is important. Going back to April's question, it is important that this revolution really is deepened and extended rather than basically being aborted by foreign powers or by reactionary forces within the country itself.
So actually, Alfredo asked another question. I think it does kind of summarize what you just answered to his question, is how are neighboring countries reacting? So
neighboring countries basically are fed up with the Islamic Republic. The Islamic Republic puts its nose everywhere where it does not belong, from Iraq to Syria, from Syria to Yemen, and definitely to Lebanon, you just name it. So it's adventurism, military adventurism, and its acts of terrorism. The fact that even in Europe, they were the ones who terrorized, not just terrorized, but assassinated, for instance, many people, including the Kurdish leaders. So this regime is a terroristic, basically, state in the region itself, and also in the United States, much less so. They have not been able to do that, but in Europe they have. And obviously, those states have let the Islamic Republic get away with crime. And we consider them accountable. And that is why definitely this dread of conscience, or this dread of sense of responsibility, hopefully would come to them, would come to their senses that the Islamic Republic is truly a terrorist state, internally and externally. So its relationship to its neighbors has been to support the most reactionary, retrograde forces in the history of humankind, including Hezbollah, including all the really reactionary forces.
Do women feel heard now since the movement?
Are heard more?
Yes.
I think so. I think, women are heard more, and definitely, this transformation does not happen overnight. Probably Afshin would comment on this. It did not just happen suddenly, and it's going to change, but this change doesn't come along, doesn't occur immediately. It takes basically time. But I would say, I've seen scenes of incredible, really alignment between young women and young men. something that, for instance, in gender apartheid means, the women and men, girls and boys were segregated. They even in universities, they had to eat in different quarters. On buses, they had different segments. And that is what gender apartheid means. So the new generation is saying, go to hell with these restrictions. Go to hell if you don't let basically a woman's voice to be heard. Go to hell if you think that the hair from a woman sends out dangerous beams, that it seduces men. It reduces men, but it does not seduce men. See, so is it changing? Obviously, the Islamic Republic, under the guise of fighting against cultural imperialism, took along with it many intellectuals, many leftists, but they have to be ashamed of themselves. Women were the first ones who really said no to the Islamic Republic, to the hijab, but no one really supported them vehemently. The Islamic Republic, little by little, restricted them to social services, to enter public places. It imposed on them a draconian, basically, lifestyle. So that is changing. There is a new, basically, breeze. There is a new discourse, if you will, in the air.
And we have another comment by, I think, of Afshin. Is that? Yes. He said nothing to add to Professor Sharif's presentation.
Oh, okay.
So no comments.
Yeah, he is a very good friend of mine, actually, yes.
And you also talked about the morality police. Like hypothetically, if the women did get if they got all the demands they met, would they ever abolish the morality police that they had?
There was talk about basically, yes, abolishing the morality police at the height of the movement. But now, obviously, there are tensions within them, and they want to basically reimpose those repressive measures or restrictions on women, including hijab. And it was not just hijab. Hijab was really a metaphor for the limitations and the constraints that they imposed on women. So right now, there is really this contestation going on. On the one hand, the so-called reactionary, basically the rightist forces, the theocratic forces to the bone, want to impose these draconian restrictions on women. So this fight, this tension is still going on. And that's why they are using social media. They have not been able to do so, yet they are using social media to control women more specifically through their surveillance, basically, devices, through obviously the technology has not really significantly, hopefully, it will never be used by governments to that extent, but they are doing their best. Would they succeed? I don't think so.
When I think of morality police, I picture just the police like we have in the United States, except they're more tougher on religious police and
That's true. Yeah, that's true. Morality police basically is the force, the so-called guidance. They do have euphemistic terms for them to guide people, to guide women, for instance. And therefore, the morality police is intertwined. It's really the very existence, the epistemology, the knowledge base of the Islamic Republic. So it's about their moral imperatives, but they are still in power. These are the ones basically who killed Jina, Mahasa, Amini. And that sparked basically a revolution in Kurdish areas, and then throughout Iran, and then throughout the world.
So Afshan did say thank you for a great lecture, as well as Denisha. She said, great lecture, Professor. Good night.
Thank you very much, everyone. I really appreciate your.
Have a great night, guys. Bye.